The art critic Douglas Cooper once called this painting the Big Red Monster and meant it as praise for the work. So what makes this painting so striking? I'm Alexandra Loske, a colour historian and the curator of the Royal Pavilion at Brighton and Hove Museums. This is Combing the Hair by the French Impressionist painter Edgar Degas, created in 1896 with the original French title La Coiffure. It shows two women in a room, one is brushing the other one's hair. Degas painted this late in his career, one of several paintings on this theme. And this particular painting is a relatively large work for him. Colour is one of the most important things about the painting, and it is often described as being almost monochrome. Degas used dense reds for almost the entire painting, in an extraordinary range, from subdued crimson and sharp scarlet to a range of rich oranges and soft, dusty pinks. And these are subtly dotted by yellow objects, black lines and some white areas. The painting appears rapidly painted, but was it? Although combing the hair seems to have been painted spontaneously, we know it was in fact meticulously planned. It is possible that this work is unfinished, since it remained in Degas' studio until his death and is not signed. However, an unfinished look is typical of many of Degas' works. He often created many preparatory sketches. In these, he concentrated on the shape and the posture of his figures, often ignoring the individuality of the people he portrayed, who were mostly women. He instead created content, mood, and atmosphere entirely through colour, shade, composition, and shape. For this painting, several sketches exist, one of them in a much more traditional colour scheme with a mix of yellows, blues and whites. Degas was one of the most technically complex artists of the 1800s, working in a range of different media, techniques and styles, and often in combination. He was greatly influenced by the traditional academic approach to painting, but seemed to enjoy tearing up the rule books and experimenting with the use of paint and colour. Let's have a closer look at the composition of the painting. So the room is implied rather than clearly shown. The shapes and people are simpler compared to the sketches that Degas created earlier. He is introducing an abstract approach here, very noticeable in the background, which he flooded with a luscious red colour. But the painting is also surprisingly geometrical. There are strong verticals and diagonal lines. A curtain creates a triangle shape in the top left corner, making it look like a stage and mirroring the pose of the woman who is seated. Her body creates the main diagonal line through the composition, which extends through her long hair to the other woman's right arm and all the way up to her pinned up hair in the top right corner. Our eyes follow this diagonal line and the feeling of movement in the brushing of the hair. The table that pushes into the composition provides some depth and perspective, and yet another diagonal. And going against this is the standing woman. She forms a strong vertical element. Degas may have been inspired by Dutch paintings of interiors from the 1600s here, where heavy fabrics often frame or stage a scene, and tables are an important part of the groups of objects featured. So how does this dense structure and fiery colour scheme make us feel? This tight composition of people and objects feels almost claustrophobic. You are looking close up at an unclear scene. You can't really define the space these two women are in. There is no floor to anchor them, or us, in fact, the viewer. No walls with windows or pictures. This mystery is heightened by the fiery colour scheme. Does this space look and feel like a hot oven, perhaps, or a stifling or unsettling interior? And there's further uncertainty when we look at the twisted body of the woman whose hair is being brushed. There's a physical tension implied in how she is painted. Her left hand is raised and appears clenched, and she's holding her scalp with her right hand, certainly in discomfort and likely in pain. Degas often depicted women's bodies in extreme positions and contortions. Then there is the vague topic of the painting. While there is an unspoken closeness between the two women, it is unclear what their relationship is, and the close-up view of them adds a voyeuristic quality. Degas is not telling a tale, he is painting a sense of uncertainty, a mood, and perhaps the beginning of a story. So, what does colour mean in this painting? Degas has drenched the painting in warm and hot colours. But why did he turn up the temperature, so to speak? Do these hot shades of reds and oranges suggest pain, pleasure, intimacy, or even eroticism? What seems certain is that Degas chose this almost monochromatic scheme deliberately to add an intensity to it. Degas achieved this sumptuous look of the painting by layering and combining different colours in subtle ways. He began with a prepared white ground, the first coat of colour of the painting, as he usually did, with a warm lead white, a chalk white, and a little yellow earth. He then added a pinkish underpainting for flesh tones and sketched out the dark contours of some of the objects and figures in charcoal black. He outlined the table in a dark red, but the tablecloth is white, likely the same lead white, but mixed with a little mauve that we can also see in the standing woman's blouse. The overwhelming reds in the painting are mainly created from three pigments: a richly coloured earth red, an opaque vermilion, and a lead-based red that provided a more orange tone. He used these reds in many combinations, such as adding small amounts of viridian, a green pigment, to make the slightly cooler reds in the background. The only accents of other colours are the yellow brush and comb, for which he used yellow earth again and viridian. In his work generally, Degas used pretty much the full range of pigments and paints available in the late 1800s. For example, warm and rich chrome yellows, affordable French ultramarine, a synthetic alternative to the real ultramarine made from lapis lazuli, or deep Prussian blue, vibrant cobalt blue and emerald green, viridian, madder lake, a transparent organic colour, and many others. He was particularly fond of red and brown earths and mixed them with lead white as well as vermilion to create the warm tones that characterize many of his works. So modern pigments such as these, many of them synthetic and commercially produced, allowed artists at the time to be experimental and expressive in their use of colour. With this access to new pigment technology, Degas and the Impressionists could play with the colour theories being developed in the 1800s, including with the idea of cold and warm colours. For example, Vincent van Gogh perfectly understood the power of colours in his painting The Sunflowers. He painted it in rich chrome yellows, which seemed to be glowing and giving off warmth, representing the sun. In his landscapes, he often used cool blues when painting skies and contrasted them with the warm yellow richness of wheat fields, as we can see in A Wheat Field with Cypresses. So these theories on the temperature of colours can be found in German playwright Johann Wolfgang von Goethe's hugely influential work Theory of Colours, zur Farbenlehre, from 1810. The first part of this was translated into English in 1840 by none other than Charles Locke Eastlake, the National Gallery's first director. But even before Goethe, the English flower painter Martha Gartside, also known as Mary Gartside, discussed cold and warm colours in her 1805 book, an essay on light and shade, on colours and on composition in general. Degas is often described as a painter of modern life and was clearly fascinated by the late 19th century Paris. Unlike many of his Impressionist colleagues, Degas rarely focused on landscape and natural light, instead preferring contained, complex, artificially lit spaces. This is seen in his intimate and at times voyeuristic images of ballet dancers, acrobats, and women in indoor settings. Although influenced by Manet, Delacroix, and other French contemporaries, he had also carefully studied and copied Dutch and Italian old masters, and learnt a lot about composition, how a painting should be arranged, and subtle colouring from them. Degas was an artist who was both spontaneous and methodical in equal measures. It is clear that Degas was a technical master of colour, and here, in this painting of two women in an intimate situation, he uses colour to appeal to our senses. This red-hot monster of a painting makes us feel, evoking ambiguity, intimacy, and tension.